Well, Doctor Who has officially finished season 1. And yeah, I'm gonna put my episode tier list as I promised at the very start when I reviewed Space Babies. This is the tier list video for that, and I'm going to mini review every episode and put them into my tier list and see what we come up with. Just so you're all aware, I have watched every single episode at least twice. Yeah, let's dive right in. Before we go any further, I would ask you to subscribe if you love Doctor Who and Doctor Who content. This channel is all about Who and has some great stuff coming and already has some great stuff already on the channel. So the Church on Ruby Road was actually released before this channel had got started, believe it or not. Obviously this was released at Christmas time, so I didn't get the chance to actually review it yet. I potentially could release a review if you guys would be interested in that, but I didn't get a chance to review this one. But I have watched this episode 4 times now, I think. 3 or 4 times I've seen this episode, and if I'm being completely honest, I do like it, but I don't know if it's the singing or the newness and freshness of obviously Ruby and the Doctor, and then it's this whole fresh thing about goblins and things being magical and fantasy, and it's just like a big massive deep dive into the deep end of, hey, Doctor Who's different now and this is the way it's going to be. And I don't know, even watching it after watching the season and then going back and watching the Church on Ruby Road, it still didn't quite... It was great, don't get me wrong, it was great to have a Christmas episode back because I was missing them, and the New Year's one just wasn't it. Honey, it wasn't it. But yeah, this episode falls on a C for me. It really does. It just lacks something. Like, it throws the gadgets, don't get me wrong, the gadgets are there, and we have like the gloves having an appearance and stuff like that, but I don't know, it just doesn't quite do it for me. I was expecting an RTD Christmas special. The only thing really in this is the Christmas decor and the fact that Ruby's birthday's in Christmas. It literally, and there's some snow at the church, but it doesn't feel Christmassy beyond that, and it kind of fell short for me. The next one is Space Babies. So this episode, I will be completely honest, I refused to watch a second time because I'd already watched it twice. So what I'm classing as a second time is when I've watched it on my own. So I watch it the first time usually and write my review, so I take my points and stuff, and then I'll watch it a second time after that, because when you're taking notes, you're pausing it, you're writing down stuff, you're focusing on the plot, you're not really focusing on the actual episode and enjoying it. So what I like to do is I'll usually watch it at midnight, post my review, and then I'll watch it again on the Saturday evening when it airs on TV, unless I miss it and I catch it up on iPlayer. But yeah, this one I have watched twice, technically, and I refuse to watch it again for this specific tier list, just because, no. For a starting episode, this should never have been the first episode of the season. It just got everybody off to a bad start. I could see where RTD was going with it, but I just genuinely, no, it wasn't for me. Overall, my review for this, I believe my review for this is quite positive actually, but I think that was me getting mixed up in the hype that the fact that Doctor Who had been back, and obviously we had practically zero Doctor Who for about 3 years. We had the specials, we had the Christmas episode special, and then we had this. So it's literally just been missing Doctor Who, I think, and the fact that this came back and I'm like, oh, Doctor Who, Space Babies, yeah, let's go, and then on reflection, when I couldn't even bring myself to watch the episode for this tier list, I'm like, yeah, that's not for me. It's probably an episode that I might never visit again, to be honest. However, we did get a double bill, so we got Space Babies and The Devil's Chord released back to back just before the Eurovision, which I felt was a little bit of a shame considering we've only got 8 episodes of a season. So technically we could have had an extra week of Doctor Who if they had just not released this. The reason I feel like they released The Devil's Chord is because it kind of mixes in with the theme of Eurovision, its music. I don't know if there was any real purpose in why they released them back to back. Not that I've heard any news on. I think they just did. And I feel like that was such a shame. Personally, I feel like The Devil's Chord should have came before Space Babies, because then we would have got off to a relatively good start to then be let down. Like, you see where I'm going with this, whereas it was off to a bad start, and that's not kind of what you want for a big hyped up season like Doctor Who coming back after so many years of people kind of disliking the show. Personally, for me, I loved The Devil's Chord, and it's going straight into B because although it's not a fantastic episode, it's better than Space Babies, and it really, really got me hyped. On one side, I'm a little bit disappointed that they released both episodes at the same time, but on the other side, I'm so glad they did, because it gave us something that's watchable in comparison to Space Babies. Now, I know a lot of people love Space Babies, but it's just not an episode for me personally. That leads us on to the fantastic Steven Moffat and Boom. So I had really high hopes for Boom, and I thought with Steven being away for so long, it would have gave him a chance to rest that little brain of his, because I know coming towards the end of his tenure as showrunner, he was running Sherlock, he was running Doctor Who, he was having to hand scripts in left, right and centre. So his story started to fall a little bit short in comparison to what his earlier stuff on Doctor Who was like. Steven was a really, really good writer. And personally, I've always loved Steven's episodes. I've always loved his stories and his concepts and the timey-wiminess of everything. I love how he interweaves plots and stuff like that. It's my type of thing. It's not for everyone, but I love it. And this episode was absolutely booming. I loved it. It was a fantastic episode, and it's going straight in the A tier. Do I think it could be better? Yes, there's things that in my review that I think I mentioned that I felt could have been changed or could have been expanded on or stuff like that. So yeah, I feel like the episode could have been better, but I love the fact that it was just a full episode full of just callbacks to Steven's work and had all these little Easter eggs in it, which was amazing. Yeah, it was really nostalgic and nice to kind of have Steven back in Doctor Who again. And I'm looking forward to his Christmas episode as well. That brings us on to the most hyped episode of the season. Now, Russell didn't stop going on about 73 Yards. Russell kept going on about this episode. It was the best episode he had ever written. We had heard from other writers and other people from Doctor Who that it was the best episode they'd ever read. So hyping it up that much kind of led people like me that review the episodes to go into the episode with a certain standard. Had you not hyped this episode up and just let us kind of dive into it and watch it, I think a lot of people's opinions would have been a lot higher of the episode than what they were. Not saying that the opinions weren't high, because a lot of people loved this episode of Doctor Who. A lot, including myself. I did love this episode of Doctor Who. It was a little bit confusing, but had we been left to just kind of go into it, I think people would have been completely blown away with this episode, because having people's expectations set high, they're going to go into that episode with really high expectations of it, and then it kind of lowers their expectations when it doesn't meet what they were expecting. So I feel that kind of let this episode down a little bit. This episode makes S rank for me. I loved it, absolutely loved it, honest to God. I literally wanted to put it back on again straight after watching it, and I couldn't, because I had to come write the review and record the review for it. But yeah, I loved it. It was a great episode, fantastic writing, very, very timey-wimey from Russell, which is not normally something we get from him. It's normally anagrams and things dotted throughout seasons and stuff like that. It's not very confusing in the way that this one was. And I do really like the fact that the episode kind of leaves the viewer to kind of decide what the ending meant for them. That was really nice. Although there is a specific meaning to the ending that Russell probably will never share with us. But I do like the fact that you can just walk away from the episode and everything that happened in it's kind of to your own perception rather than it being the same perception for everybody. So Dot and Bubble, this episode was doubted by everybody. This was the least episode I think most people were looking forward to for this season, and I think the name kind of makes it, even the look of the photo, it just makes it look as if it's not going to be that great an episode, to be honest. This was the second episode in a row where it was Doctor Light, and a lot of people weren't really digging that. I personally feel like they should have maybe released Rogue and then Dot and Bubble, and then that way we got a chance to see the Doctor, and it wouldn't have felt as if the Doctor hadn't been there for his own show. Like, it's called Doctor Who, we kind of need the Doctor to be there in order for it to be Doctor Who. But personally for me, I actually felt like Millie Gibson and ᴍᴏ괜ᴜᴜ were actually in this episode a lot. It wasn't like you didn't feel their presence throughout the episode, and there wasn't a part where I was like, oh, we've not seen the Doctor in a while, or we've not seen Ruby in a while. They were there and they were present, and it genuinely felt like they had been in the full episode for me personally, and I did like this episode. I really, really thought that Callie Cook had held it up, and it was very reminiscent of Blink, where we just had the one female protagonist who kind of ran through the full story with us, and they were there as a constant. If they can hold that role up, an episode like this of Doctor Who works fantastic. But this episode for me fell into the B rank. So this episode wasn't fantastic, it wasn't something absolutely spectacular. Don't get me wrong, we've seen some stuff in this episode that we would have never been able to see in Doctor Who previously. I can see why Russell and Stephen Moffat held off on this one, because CGI and visual effects in this episode were just phenomenal. Like, honest to God, it was amazing what they had managed to do with it. So that leads me on to Rogue. And my review for this one, I didn't even give a tier letter or a rating number for this review. For this one, I didn't even write a review for the actual review that I posted. It was literally basically from the notes that I took, and I just blathered on about the episode. I wasn't fully impressed by this episode initially. I didn't like the fact that they had led the Doctor down a romantic path. I know, before anyone says in the comments, we have seen it before, and it's not because it was two men. It's nothing to do with that. It's just I genuinely feel like that was a step in the wrong direction with how the show is being hated on as well. It's just kind of like throwing it further in their faces. What I feel like we're trying to do is drag viewers back in, but this just felt like it was a step potentially pushing more viewers away from the show. Personally, that was my opinion initially, until I seen the other people's reviews for this, and I seen the hype around Rogue. And I literally, I'd say at the end of my review, I was like, I need to watch this again. I need to actually process this episode again. And I did say that in my review. I think that's why I never gave any scores, because I wasn't actually wanting to tier it without actually feeling like I was settled on my decision on the episode. And I watched it again. Lo and behold, this episode is absolutely fantastic. I'm not really into Regency drama, so I think maybe that threw me off to begin with when I first watched it and reviewed it. But yeah, the chemistry between Jonathan Groff and ᴍᴏ괜ᴜᴜ was fantastic. The romance thing, I kind of ignored that the second time round because it just wasn't really for me. I didn't really want that from the Doctor. I think I was craving more adventure and danger from this season at this point. If you look at every episode we've got, there was not really any episodes that made you feel like there was immediate danger and things needed to be resolved, like it could have been left till next week. I don't know, it just felt like everything was kind of really slow paced, and then I felt like they took away from Childers, and the potential of those aliens in this episode could have been so much more. We could have had them so much more dangerous and earth threatening rather than just focusing on the fact that they like to cosplay. Like, if that romance storyline wasn't there, how much more could we have fitted into this story to make it a proper good Doctor Who episode? Minus that, the romance stuff wasn't too bad after a second watch, and I really didn't mind this episode after a second watch, to be honest. I think I just needed to go in with a fresh brain. So surprisingly, after my really rubbish review of this episode, I'm actually giving it an A tier because it is a fantastic episode of Doctor Who, and I enjoyed it, and it's probably one that I will go back and watch again. And that leads us on to the last two episodes of the season, which is so sad because now we've got another year at least before we have any other Doctor Who, because I'm not sure if they're going to try and release it early in 2025 or if they're going to end up releasing it later in 2025, because we all know Doctor Who does better in the winter. It always does better in the winter. So The Legend of Ruby Sunday, I don't think I need to say much about this. This is the most Doctor Who episode that has ever been this full season. This episode was absolutely top tier. It was fantastic. It's going straight in S rank because this was just perfection. Yes, there was some stuff in there that didn't need to be there. There was some stuff there that could potentially have slowed the plot down a little bit. I'm not mad at that. I love this episode. For a first part of a two-parter, this episode really raised the stakes well, left us with a fantastic cliffhanger, set up for episode 8. I know there's going to be people that disagree with that, but yeah, that is my ranking for The Legend of Ruby Sunday. And I went into that episode with lower expectations than I normally would, because I was like, it's Russell. Season finales are always kind of like one and done. They're never anything super spectacular, and this just built up the tension and everything. I mean, that time window scene had me literally gritting my teeth. I was literally grabbing my hands and everything. I was struggling to take notes for the review whilst I was watching this episode because it gripped me that much. More of this, please, for season 2, because that's the kind of stuff that we need for Doctor Who. Okay, so Empire of Death was interesting. So this is how I see it, okay? So we're all dogs in this season. I've got a dog, he's called Fred. Getting teased with a bone. My dog is alive, he's not dead. Because we know there's a good thing coming when we get the bone. This season of Doctor Who treated us like dogs, teasing us with a bone. And then they just took the bone right back off us when we finally got it. Well, that's alright then. I've actually had to write out what I wanted to say for the Empire of Death for this tier list because I don't want to get lost in the answers we kinda didn't get. I've done my review for this episode. It's on the channel and I still feel similar to how I did in my review. The only thing that has changed is that I have accepted the finale was not terrible. In fact, if you take out why does it snow?
Oh, it just does.
Well, that's alright then.
Why did her mother point at the road sign that wasn't even there in the church on Ruby Road and no one was around anyway?
Oh, 'cause she could.
Well, that's alright then.
Oh, okay. So Sutek is the god of all gods, but he couldn't break a bungee cord, but can turn literal universes to dust.
Oh, that was a special bungee cord.
Oh, well, that's alright then.
Oh. This episode would have been an S rank on here, and I could go on because I'm having so much fun with this, but I shall stop before it's no longer funny. You guys agreed that it does have a lot of tears in the fabric of its makeup, and it really feels like there was possibly some last minute changes to the script, to be honest. The ending for Ruby I really did like. I didn't mind that her mother was an ordinary person who had a career as a nurse, an amazing and a special person as all our nurses and doctors are. So she didn't need to be a god, and I was okay with that. I just feel like the bone we were getting teased with all season long wasn't the bone we eventually got at the end, and I think there could have really been some things that could have been improved on majorly. But the thing that I'm holding on to now is that Ruby's story isn't actually finished yet, so we might get to reflect back on the Empire of Death and be like, oh,
it was the wrong man ground.
I'm really intrigued by Mrs. Flood, but I'm also left with a sense of distrust in Russell for the previous mysteries. So to me, at this moment in time, Mrs. Flood is going to remain as just Mrs. Flood until I get more evidence. Come on, Christmas, give us some answers. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with this ranking for Empire of Death, but I'm giving it an A on the tier list. It wasn't at all a bad episode. There was just a lot of kind of half-answered questions and underwhelming endings to story arcs. The overall episode was fun and very Doctor Who. There was a lot of good in amongst the disappointment. Actually, there was more good than disappointment, and it's definitely better on a rewatch. This will become a loved season finale one day, just like the 13th Doctor will be loved. I will be tuning in for next season because I love Doctor Who, so regardless of what rubbish they hit us with, I'm going to just eat it up like dog food anyway. And I know that most majority of you guys are actually quite happy to tune in for next season as well. Here's the poll. I left it for 2 days to see what would happen, and some of you guys weren't satisfied but are happy to watch next season. Some of you guys were satisfied and thought it was a great season, a great finale, and are happy to watch next season. And there's a few of you that aren't so happy to tune in next season, but I do hope you change your mind, because I feel like now that we have Nshuti's full attention to Doctor Who, this next season should hopefully be a little bit better. I will ask you again to subscribe if you love Doctor Who and Doctor Who content. This channel is all about Doctor Who and we love it here. And there's some great stuff coming, and as I said, there's great stuff already on the channel. Click this video if you want to stay in the YouTube Whoniverse, because honestly, it's always the best place to be.